All right, so we would like to welcome you back to another. Oh man, I didn't plan any kind of
I got a word.
overselling adjective for this one. You got one?
I got one. Welcome to another moderately neato episode of V8 Radio. And
Gee,
of course,
Wally.
I have to give the nod to George Carlin for that one.
That sounds like an episode of The Beaver right there.
Yeah, exactly.
How was your day, Beaver? Gee, Wally, it was moderately neato.
Oh, heck, Beeve.
All right, well, I'm your host, Kevin Ostie, joined as always by Mr. Mike Q-Ball Clark at V8 Radio Studios North.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. It's a beautiful day up here, up in the north area.
Yeah, finally, huh?
Yeah, how about it? It is just kicking out here. I'm loving it.
It's moderately neato.
It is more than moderately neato. It is super neato.
You don't want to go excessively neato on anything.
Exactly, no. Inexplicably neato.
Right. Well, you know, as we do these episodes, we came up with this idea a while back of enticing people to listen to the whole thing. So it's more than just you and I that hear this, we hope.
Yes, we hope.
And one of our ways of enticing was the trivia question concept. And I don't keep score, but I know I've dropped a few. I know you've dropped a few.
You're very kind to me. Thank you.
Do you have one for this week that you're prepared
I indeed have one. Yes, sir.
You're prepared to put me in the ground with?
I doubt it, but I'm always giving it my best shot.
Yeah.
All right. You have one?
I do. You want me to go first?
All right. Yeah, let's have you go first this time,
all
just to really blow my mind.
All right. Well, this one, it's not related to a specific car. It's actually related to all cars in the United States at one point. And I recently just heard this, and if you heard it from the same source I did, you'll get it right, and I will laugh, but we'll see.
Okay.
In what year did the United States impose the 55-mile-an-hour speed limit? And why was that done? Is the bonus. The question is what year, but the bonus is why.
That was imposed, I believe, in...
And I have to caveat the bonus because I'm making up my opinion on why.
Okay. Understood. Well, I remember, the bonus was, I know that the tagline was 55 saves lives.
Right.
So, and it also saved a lot of gas, too. But the year it was imposed, I want to say 1974. I didn't hear it from your source, but I'm going to say 74 is when it was imposed.
1974, he says. Mm-hmm. Well, it seems contextual, I guess, to what was going on back in the 70s.
Mm-hmm. We had the gas crisis going on. People needed to save more gas. People were dropping their super cool muscle cars because they didn't get good mileage. Driving Hondas around in Pintos for their mileage and all that horrific stuff.
Yeah, it was a dismal time.
It was. Poor build quality, poor gas lines.
Well, unless you drove a Super Duty Trans Am, you're still okay.
Right. True.
74 was still a holdout for that car.
True. Oh, that's right. It was.
Yeah. All right. Well, I will note that as 1974, and then your rationale is perhaps why.
55 saved lives.
All right. I will note that too.
All right. Right on.
All right. What do you got for me?
Because Kevin gives away nothing. I could be dead nuts on, and he wouldn't let me know.
Well, you know, what? Then they'd tune out.
That's true. That's a good point. That's a good point. I can learn from you.
Like that's the reason too. You know, not that.
All right, I got a few questions here. I'm trying to pick the best one to really bake your noodle.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. All right, here I'll go with this one. When did the first mass-produced overhead valve V8 engine hit the streets in America?
American built or American built, mass-produced overhead V8.
Overhead valve V8.
Overhead valve V8.
Mm-hmm.
I'm
Bonus question is, which manufacturer came out with it?
I'm gonna say it was 1949 Cadillac.
1949 Cadillac.
Yeah.
Is that your final answer, sir?
Well, that's what I'm thinking right now, and that was certainly one of the more popular ones.
Mm-hmm.
But the trick here is that there could have been a far less mass-produced version that hit the streets before
again,
that.
we're talking mass-produced. We're not talking like onesie-twosie craft-built stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, why not? I'll go with the 49 Cadillac.
49 Cadillac. All right. I am notating that. There we go.
Yes, nice. I saw the notation. What are you, a surgeon now? It looks like you're signing prescriptions there.
Well, this is a precision operation here.
Yeah, I could tell. All right. Well, what's happening in your neck of the woods these days?
Oh, in my neck of the woods, I've been,
and that's code, by the way, for I have nothing prepared for today's show.
That's okay. We're finally on the same page because I never have anything prepared.
Giving our listener more for his or her podcast dollar.
Exactly. Right on.
Which we've not yet collected.
Gosh. Well, in my automotive world, not a lot going on. I just had to do some repairs to my daily driver. I had some cooling system issues and got that worked out last Thursday. And other than that, I mean, I haven't touched the GTO. I haven't heard from my guy, my machinist, and I'm at this point, I mean, more than doomed for taking it on the power tour. However, I am going on the power tour in a few legs.
Right on. At this
my
point,
buddy
that's only a couple weeks away.
Exactly, yeah. Just June 11th, I believe it's starting to kick off. June 9th or 10th or something.
Mm-hmm.
And but my neighbor Robert with the 66 Galaxy has graciously offered to let me ride shotgun with him on a few legs. So,
right on.
Yeah, so we'll hit the Des Moines leg, the Davenport leg, and the Champaign leg.
Oh, cool.
Coming back. Unfortunately, we're not going to make it to Gateway, which I kind of really wanted to, but not happening this time. Unfortunately.
I think I knew a guy in high school that we used to call the Champagne Leg.
Is that
right? I'm not sure why, but
and the show gets better and better, folks.
Well, this year's Power Tour is, it's always a heck of an experience, and it has grown in, I would say, literally exponentially from when I started doing it a million years ago. My only complaint about this year's tour, and somebody posted kind of in recent years too, somebody posted something online with the route, and I responded just with a photograph of corn. Because
right.
This is the Cornfield Tour Extraordinaire, going from Kansas City, right? Is that where it starts?
Yeah, it does.
To Des Moines, then through Illinois, and then down southern Illinois, and then over into Indiana, and then down to Kentucky. So it's a lot of corn to see. But the flip side is there's also going to be 5,000 cars to look at. So
yeah,
you might not see the corn. Yeah. I had to be reminded of that. And that 66 Galaxy is is that a hardtop car or is it a convertible?
No, it's a convertible.
That's what I thought. That's cool.
Yeah, it is cool. And he's been doing a lot of, tweaks to making sure everything is right with it. He was having a charging system problem that he got fixed. Apparently on the Galaxy, if it doesn't have a voltmeter, it has the volt light, the idiot light. And if that light is burned out, you will not charge. Your charging system will not work.
It's part of the circuit.
Yeah, it is, and he
That's
didn't
silly.
realize that.
Yeah,
and he was having forever, couldn't figure out why his alternator wasn't putting out 14 volts. It was at like 12.1, and it would slowly die off, and it was making him crazy. He even replaced the alternator, for crying out loud. And then he finally did some research and figured out that the light wasn't turning on, and the bulb was good, but there was a break in the circuit somewhere, and he found the wire that was disconnected, and he reconnected it, and voila, he's charging at 14 volts, and he's super happy. And I see him driving that stinking thing everywhere.
That's fantastic because
It is fantastic.
and that's a weird little problem. When we did that 66 7-liter, we didn't encounter that issue, but I've heard that happening before where the gauge or the idiot light is part of the circuit, and without it, you got nothing.
You got nothing.
Does that car has a cold light also in the dash when you first start up? It's a blue light that turns on. It says cold.
Yeah, I don't remember seeing that.
Yeah.
In his car, I've seen that before in Ford cars. A kid I knew in high school, he had a Cougar, and I believe it had that cold light as well. I think a 68, 69 Cougar.
Yeah, and I can only imagine that that's to tell you not to expect regular performance yet.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, it's a cool thing for back then, but
it was a cold light. Actually, it was beyond cool. This car is cold. I always thought the other fun one was in the diesel cars of the late 70s, the GM diesels, the Oldsmobiles and the Cadillacs. When you turn the key on those, well, and some later trucks too, they had a wait light.
Oh, really?
It would say wait, and the trucks, because I guess in the 80s when things became the global, when they took the words off gauges basically and everything became symbols.
Sure.
The symbol is a coil, like your it's not the ignition coil, but your glow plugs are warming up,
Sure.
So you got to wait a second. But in the 70s, they just had this thing that said wait. It was just a big light that lit up. Like, wait.
For the love of all that's holy, wait, please.
Yeah,
wait.
And I knew a guy, and a lot of those cars got converted to gasoline engines because those diesel engines, it's not that they were terrible engines, but the control systems were all mechanical. And today our diesels are so great because they're turbo diesel with electronic controllers and high technology. Well, back in the 70s, you had an injector pump and, that's about it. So they didn't run that great. So a lot of them got converted to gasoline engines, and the primary diesel engine was an Oldsmobile block. And an Olds 350 or a 307 would drop right in its place, even a 455 if you had one laying around. So many of those were converted to gas. And I knew a guy who, or I didn't know him, but I saw a car once that they wired the wait light into the brake pedal switch. So when you step on the brake, it would say wait. Because you no longer needed that light.
Right on. That's perfect.
What are you doing? Well, according to this, I'm waiting.
I'm waiting.
Yeah.
Can't you see? I'm waiting.
Yes. Yes, but back in the dismal times again of the knee-jerk reaction to the giant gas crunch.
Oh, gosh. Yeah, I remember that when I was a kid. I remember odd and even days. And if your license plate ended in an odd number, you could get gas on the odd day, and likewise with the even. And I remember my mom, she'd be so low on gas sometimes, and she had an even plate, and it would be an odd day, and she would try to scam in there and get gas, and people would yell at you, that's an even day plate, come on.
Yeah, she'd steal her neighbor's license plate or something.
Yeah, exactly.
Huh. And that's interesting. I guess back then all the plates ended in a number and not a letter.
Mm-hmm.
Huh.
Yeah.
Stuff you just don't think about. I forgot all about that odd even deal.
Yeah, that was crazy, and the long lines and no gas and all that. Oh, it was rough. It was rough.
Mm-hmm.
I remember my mom drove. Back then she had a '75 Mustang II with the 302 V8 in there. It was a pretty cool car, a hatchback and all that. I thought it was the coolest thing. I didn't know it was just a Pinto underneath.
Yeah, right. But, with 13-inch wheels or something, or.
Yeah. Oh, sure.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned that 66. The 7-liter we restored finally went home to the owner, and
Did it?
And the car's been done for a long time, but the owner didn't have a place to put it that he was happy with, so we ended up storing it for quite a while until he was ready to bring it home. And it's kind of an interesting topic because here's a car that we did a complete restoration on. Save for maybe one let me rephrase that. There's a lot of new parts in the car, and there's a lot of restored parts in that car because you can't find a lot of that stuff. And he ended up taking it home and drove it. The first problem was gasoline. lower octane gas, and it was detonating heavily.
Oh,
So,
boy.
he called and he's like, I think the timing's off on this. There's a big problem. And it's like, well, what do you got for gas? So once the fuel got changed back up to a higher octane, because that's a 10.5 to 1 428 in that car. So the compression, and it's all cast iron. So compression's high, makes a lot of heat.
Sure.
So he got that sorted out, and then he took it out. I guess he ran a couple of tanks of gas through it right away, which was good. He drove it a lot.
Good.
But it developed an issue, and it wouldn't start.
Huh.
And it's like, oh, man. And as a restorer or a shop, you hate to see these things leave and have problems, because we've touched absolutely everything on that car.
Right.
And it's always kind of interesting to communicate with the customer about a freshly restored car and an issue that might have occurred. And in this case, the problem was the neutral safety switch in the console. And you might want to, is your buddy Roberts a column shift or a floor shift?
It is a column shift.
Column. Well, the floor shift on these cars, every one I've ever been in, the shifter detent in the console is just the sloppiest thing ever.
Is that right?
Yeah, and you can rebuild them, but even so, it's just not a very precise click, click, click into gear.
Sure.
So I think they get monkeyed with quite a bit, and that slop allows that neutral safety switch to either become out of adjustment, and the safety switch itself is a slider. So when you slide the shifter into park or into neutral, it hits a certain spot on the switch, which allows the car to be started. Well, in this case, it was not allowing anything to happen in any position, which I guess was safe. He couldn't start it in reverse or something.
Yeah.
But, here's the whole situation. The guy just has, got the car back, and, he's got a lot invested in it, and he goes with the family or his girlfriend and her kid, I guess, and they go for a ride, and here's Mr. Hotshot in his car, and all of a sudden it won't start.
Oh,
So
brother.
the pressure's on, and she unfortunately is giving him a hard time. I thought you just had this thing restored. What's the problem? And as a car guy, I understand fully that stuff happens.
Right.
It just does. But not everybody gets that. And so I guess the point of this little dissertation is that even though you might have spent a whole lot of money and a lot of time on restoring a car from top to bottom, something will fail. They always do. And as Trevor, our lead mechanic, pointed out, that the biggest part of a brand new car dealer is the service department.
That's a very good point.
Yes, these are brand new cars, and the biggest deal is that yes, they break. When you look at a car that was built 50 years ago and has been gone through, yes, something also will break. But I think a lot of people have a mentality that, oh, well, it's restored, so everything's new, and we have this connotation that new means functioning, which is not a nice thing to hope for, but in reality is not always true. Right. We see it all the time. You take an alternator out of the box and it doesn't work, or you name the part. There's a chance that it can be broken right out of the box, and
absolutely.
Or it could break during operation, and even if it's not that long of a usage period, because we put several hundred miles on that car, not a problem. Started every time. In fact, I was very impressed with it had a Demon carburetor on it, which I've had limited experience with Demons. I don't know very many people that have them in just a regular street driving application. I know some guys that drag race with them. And this thing was great. It was incredible how easy starting the car was. The choke circuit worked perfectly. I mean, you hit the key and bam, it was off. So, of course, I was a little bit surprised to learn that he had a problem. But as soon as he told me what it was, what it was doing, I naturally just, it's the neutral safety switch. So I think the message is that you want to make sure that the customer doesn't color the whole restoration based on one part that went south.
Right.
Because, and I think that's what was happening to him with his significant other, and now all of a sudden it's like, well, what else is wrong with this car? And, why did you spend all this money on it? It's like, no. Just because this neutral safety switch, and I believe it actually just to be out of adjustment. I think it just slid in the housing. That has nothing to do with the, thousands of hours that were put into metalwork and bodywork and paintwork
Right.
and interior and assembly and all the rest of it.
Mhm.
But I know even in my own case, if I spent a bunch of cash on a car at a shop and I went to pick it up and something simple went wrong, I'd be mad. I'd be like, "What?
Mhm.
How did you guys miss this?" And I got to
Right.
step back and think as a car guy. Well, perhaps they didn't miss anything. And
Right. Well, I deal with that as well with my customers. We have a term that we use, and I'm sure it's everyone can use. It's called perception is reality, and to the customer, their perception is there was a not the best job done on their car, and that's their reality, and it's your job as the shop owner to adjust their perception so they do see how things really are. Listen, this is not our fault, but we'll take care of it. This is a manufacturing uh, defect. There's thousands of parts in this car. Every other one of them works great. This one particular small piece is just your issue, and we'll take care of it.
Mhm.
And hopefully, if they're a reasonable person, they'll accept that. And
well, I
they'll
mean,
say, "Okay, great."
I actually congratulated him on it. Not to be a smartass, but I told him that they don't break if you don't use them. So it's cool that you're out using it.
Right on.
And something broke. I feel terrible that, you got a hard time about it.
Mhm.
But again, you got to walk the line there too, to kind of adjust, as you say, the customer's perception of reality, because you want them to understand they got a great car, but you want them to be prepared and realistic in case something does go wrong. And then I
Exactly.
want them to know what I'm prepared to do about it. If they do have a problem, I'm not just going to say, well, that's your problem now and hang up on them, you know,
Gee, that stinks. Bye.
which kind of gets into the next thing. And that's, well, who's responsible for the parts? Because many of these, if not most of the parts in a restoration, are not warranted from the start. So
Gotcha.
if you buy a performance suspension kit or you buy ball joints or whatever, they might not come with any warranty whatsoever. The next thing is that they might have a 90-day or a 1 year or something, but this car took a year and a half to restore. So the warranty's out before you even use it.
Yeah.
And there's been cases where you don't know that a part is bad until it's in motion. So luckily, we've been able to, we've got great, relationships with the manufacturers of the stuff that we work with in our shop.
Mhm.
So if something like that happens, we can generally call them and say, hey, look, this part X has been sitting on the shelf and then in this car, and now we're finally driving it and it doesn't work right. Can you help us out? And 9 times out of 10, they'll say, yeah, just send it back and we'll switch it out, even though it's not really our fault and it's not their fault and that's
Right.
kind of beyond the warranty. But what they don't say is, yeah, and we'll cut you a check to take the dashboard apart and replace that thing.
Yeah.
Because we've had situations where there's been a part deep inside a dashboard or in the suspension or in the transmission, to where sure the or an engine. We just had it's a whole nother story, but we just had a flat tap cam go bad
Oof.
last week. It was a remanufactured engine, and the engine builder's like, well, sure, we'll give you another cam. And it's like, well, A, I don't want another flat tapped cam, and B, I got to tear this car apart. I got to tear the motor apart, and I got to take the grill out to get the cam out and all the rest of it. And who's going to pay for that? And
Yeah.
and in that case, it was a situation where we had told the customer that we didn't want to do a flat tappet cam, and he provided the engine, and we followed every spec to the T. We've got General Motors
Right.
recommended break-in procedure on the cam. We got Comp Cam's recommended break-in on the cam, and whatever the engine builder sent us as a cam break-in, by the way, it was written by like a 3-year-old. The documentation they sent for a flat tappet camshaft, and here's the rub on those, to use the pun if you got that.
Sure.
A flat tappet cam will go bad if the lifters don't spin on the cam right away, which could happen if something's over tightened, or you use the wrong lubricant, or you use the wrong break-in procedure, or it can just happen anyway. And
Yeah.
the procedure we like to use is make sure everything's lubed up properly. We always put an external oil pressure gauge on everything. We use an additive, everything according to the cam manufacturer. Start it up. We like to start them up with the valve covers off and check to see that the lifters are spinning and all the rest of it, and run it for a half an hour and then shut it off and basically be nice to it for the first 500 miles in a nutshell, checking the adjustment of the rockers and everything else along the way. What these guys sent was start the car for a minute, shut it off, and then go drive it.
Really?
Right, which to me either is a roller cam break-in procedure
That's what that sounds like to me.
that they might have put in the wrong box, but they sent 2 copies of that. And then they specified an oil. They specified a Rotella, I think a 1540 weight oil, which is a predominantly diesel truck oil. And the reason why they spec that is years ago, that used to have a high content of zinc in it, which was better for flat tappet cams. Well, a couple of years ago, when trucks went to requiring exhaust fluid and requiring having catalytic converters, all the zinc left the Rotella oil also. So that's not what to use. So in order for them to honor any kind of a warranty, we had to follow their procedure, But at the same time, we all said, no, we're not going to follow that procedure on the break-in. We ended up using their lubricant and a comp cams additive to kind of cover us.
Right.
And we still had the problem. And now you're stuck because the customer is like, he just bought this engine and it was in our shop. We did the install. And now, because the break-in instructions from the manufacturer were completely wrong, we didn't follow them. So are we on the hook? But we use GM's recommendations,
Right. Jeez.
And they're like, yeah, we'll send you another camshaft. And it's like, oh, man.
Yeah.
So we ended up.
Yeah, thanks for nothing.
Well, yeah. And part of me thinks that if, we're fortunate enough to have customers to start with. So I'm certainly not, becoming adversarial with our customer. But I would hope that if our recommendation of a roller cam engine to start with would have sunk in a little bit deeper, and we allowed him the freedom to say, well, no, I really want this one, and this is what happened. We told him this is what could happen.
Yeah.
So now I feel terrible for this poor guy because he spent a bunch of money and this thing went bad, and we've got full documentation on everything we did step by step. The engine builder, of course, is blaming us.
Of course.
You talk to Comp Cams and they say, we don't tell anybody to use that lubricant, so they're wrong right out of the box over there. End of the day, we ended up putting a roller cam in it and, eating a large chunk of that labor to do it to keep the customer happy. But the customer did spring for a roller cam, and
as they should.
Yeah, it's much safer and a better performer anyway. So it's a system of compromise, but customers today and people in general are used to new cars not having as many problems, or they don't worry about the problems because it's under warranty. You just for the first few years anyway, you can just take your car, and especially when you perceive that car to be new. I bought my brand new car. I'm going to take it back to the shop for warranty, and darn it, I'm going to make them put a new engine in it, and they're going to do it. Well, that mentality kind of translates. I just had my car restored. It's all new. Something went wrong. I'm going to make them do this.
Right.
The difference is I don't have a warranty war chest of funds available.
I don't have a manufacturer backing me up to pay me for my time that they agree to pay me for these warranty defects. Absolutely. Yeah, you're on the hook. I guess that also it makes you as a shop owner want to explain in detail and make sure the customer understands what you're going to be responsible for. If they bring parts in for you to put in their car, well, you know what? I can't warranty this part if it breaks. I can't even probably warranty my labor to replace it if it breaks, unless we put it in wrong, which we're probably not going to do.
Right. And the challenge is everybody wants to save money, definitely including myself. So I understand bringing the parts in. And to your point about us not being able to warranty a part that's brought to us, that's not an ego thing. I'm not saying that your part is bad.
Right.
I just have to provide paperwork of the transaction.
Sure.
I got to make sure
Right.
that if we're a direct buy dealer and an official dealer and stocker for a lot of these different companies, and we use those companies for a reason because we've chosen to work with them. So if one of those parts goes bad, again, like I said before, we have a good relationship and we can get it taken care of. When somebody brings something in, who knows what happened?
Yeah, you have no chain of custody for that part. You don't know what it's been through. You have zero experience with it. So
Right.
that makes total sense.
And then when it comes to to telling the customer up front, maybe it's just me, but I always hate to talk about I do it, but I hate to talk about the potential negatives and failures and bad stuff right out of the box. But you have to do it. You got to say, and in the very beginning, we try to have these conversations and say, this could go wrong. And you don't want to, we work in an interesting industry because nobody needs what we do. Nobody needs these cars, right? This isn't like food or a dishwasher, something that you have to have. So it's real easy for somebody to go, yeah, what you're telling me is that you're going to, this thing's going to be junk and I'm going to have a bunch of money in it. So I'm just not going to do it, right? Well, I'm never going to mislead a customer and say, oh, yeah, everything's great. Just send it over here and it's going to be awesome. And then it takes a dive and then you stand there and go, well, that's too bad. But I really want them to know that whatever the risk is, this is what the risk is. And when it comes to installing the part or, making it work, we document everything like crazy. More than just receipts and paperwork that way, but photographs of how the thing went together. We do all of our engine startups on video, and we shoot video with the oil pressure gauge right away and the temperature gauge, and we document where the timing was. And chances are we either have photos or video of the lubricants that we use when we put it together, and the settings on the lifters and the valve adjustments and all that stuff. So that when something does go wrong and the manufacturer or the engine builder or whoever, the customer says, well, you guys screwed it up, I can say, well, it's entirely possible that we did screw it up, but here's what we did, and here's the proof of what we did. And if this is screwed up, then we certainly cop to it. More often than not, it's, oh, yeah, okay, well, we see what you did, and it really wasn't your fault because our team knows what they're doing. And the stuff still happens.
Yeah, it does happen. I mean, it's not your first rodeo, and you guys definitely know what you're doing. And I love the fact that you take zillions of pictures and video of the restorations you do. I mean, just the ones that we see on the website versus the ones you do for every one of your cars that you work on. It really helps cover yourself, and it's also good for the customer. They have documentation of all the work they've done. That you did for them. They can take that with them, and it's secure in the fact that you did a quality job,
right?
Whatever work you did.
Well, at the end of the day, we're all car fanatics, and we're all on the same team. But when you introduce a bunch of money into a project, that's when people can become suspect. And I would much rather be able to say, hey, look, for the past year or whatever it's been, 6 months, 2 years, whatever. We've kept you in the loop on stuff, and we've always showed you the pictures, and you're free to. We have an open door policy; anybody can come visit anytime they want, and we ask that they call ahead purely to make sure that we're there, because sometimes our technicians are usually there all the time, but Kelly and I might be traveling or at an event or something, and it's not one of those deals. But I tell them, you don't have to call in advance because I got nothing to hide. It's not like I'm going to pull your car out of mothballs and, try and make it look like we're working on it. Everything in the shop is being worked on. So surprise visits are okay too. I just don't want you to be disappointed if you wanted to see us and we're at the upholstery shop or something, down the street. So yeah, you try to, make sure that everybody's on the up and up. And then at the end, if something does go wrong, we've got plenty of customers, the vast majority who have had an issue with something that call us up and they go, oh man, you know what, that oil pan's leaking again. And we all at the same time go, oh man, that sucks. All right, well, let's see if we can get it figured out, and we say, this is what we've done so far and that didn't work. This time, unfortunately, maybe we got to pull the chrome pan and do something else, whatever.
Right. Yeah.
But it gets challenging, and that's one of the stress levels of sending a car home is knowing, I know something's going to go wrong.
So yeah, there's always going to be. Typically, there'll be a little bit of extra tweaking that has to get done. Because when these people start using their car, that's when the things are going to come out.
Yep.
That's when the little cockroaches are going to come out of the woodwork and have little issues here.
Yes, but it's not the end of the world. And
it's not the end of the world.
And unfortunately, it's to be expected in a restoration. And this topic, I'm glad you brought this up.
Right on.
I prepared for this today. I'm glad we're discussing this topic because I think a lot of shops and definitely the media, nobody talks about it. It's always, if you look at a magazine or a website or a TV show or a video, it's, we put this together and look at how awesome it is and we live happily ever after.
Right.
And it's never 3 months later. And we've had so many weird things that, again, we've got kind of the hotline to a lot of the manufacturers because we know these guys. And the standard response, if we're calling on a tech question, generally it's a pretty higher level thing because we can solve most of the smaller stuff, in-house, no problem. But on some of your higher level fuel injection systems or electronics, when we make the call, something happened, and it's always the same response. Well, we haven't heard that one yet. That's the first time somebody called about that.
Right.
So we, Trevor and I joke about being the first timers on all this stuff. And we had a car in the shop. It had an electronic aftermarket fuel injection system on it that the software got corrupted, and you turn the key and it would pump the fuel injectors at max PSI and flood. I mean, you want to talk about the term flooding. We had gasoline literally, if we would have turned the key, it would have hydrolocked the engine with the amount of fuel that it dumped.
Holy cow.
All the injectors just sprayed max the minute you turn the key. And we shut it off, and we're like, wow, this thing smells like gas. We're looking at it. You look down there, and it's like garden hoses going into the intake manifold. So we run our diagnostics that you can with this particular system, and there's no setting that says turn off complete evacuation spray. It's not part of the deal. So you call a manufacturer and you go, guess what? We got one now, and they're like, yeah, we never heard of that. Of course, but that happens to us. So again, we had to tell the customer that this is what it was doing, and sometimes you're on the phone with them. You almost want to tell them, look, I can't make this up, and it's nothing that we did. It's a bug in the software, and it's going to happen.
Right. That's trippy.
It really is. So, again, to kind of keep everybody enthusiastic about the car and moving forward, and I think the other part of it is that we put so much, and our team cares so much about building these cars properly, that when something happens, it's hard not to take it personally. It really kind of peas in everybody's Cheerios when a customer calls and says, hey, even if it's something small, like I got a leak or a drip or whatever, and because we're all so much in the game, it's hard not to look at each other on a team and say, well, did you do this right, or did you not check that? And I always have to step back and say, no, I've got the utmost faith in these guys. I'm not worried that they overlooked something as simple as a bolt loosening up or whatnot. But we feel terrible about it, and you got to tell the customer, again, we're gonna try and help you out. We just did a 71 C10 pickup truck with an LS swap, and it's this customer's only car. It's his daily driver. As soon as we finished this job, he sold his regular truck, and he told us, we knew that this is going to be his regular daily driving car, and he wanted it to be that reliable, and we said, we can do that. And he calls up with a fan issue, a cooling fan issue, and those are never good. And luckily, this guy he had two problems. First, the radiator started leaking, and his diagnostics was, he called and he said, you guys left off a hose clamp on a radiator hose, and it's leaking. And I thought, we left off a hose clamp, That's a little amateur, right? So went back to the photographs, and there's the hose clamp. So we did not leave the hose clamp off. So we're trying to figure out where he was coming from there. And then he had this radiator leak. Well, he brought the car in, and It turns out the overfill catch can hose didn't have a regular screw clamp on it.
Okay.
So he thought that was missing the hose clamp. He thought that's what the problem was, and it really wasn't necessary in that case. And we told him that, but we put one on anyway to make him happy. And the leak was that this brand new aluminum radiator from a reputable company started separating in the middle of the core. And it was leaking right from the middle of the core. So we call the radiator company and we say, hey guys, this brand new radiator we just bought for almost $1,000 is leaking. What do you recommend? And they said, well, usually when that happens, it's not grounded properly. And you've got an electrolysis situation happening between the aluminum, the coolant, and the steel. He said, so your engine block isn't grounded right, so it's grounding through the radiator and causing it to unweld itself. And we said, okay, what do you recommend for grounds? And they told us, well, you need one here at the battery and one here at the back of the motor, and the body's got to be grounded properly to the frame. And I said, okay, cool. So we'll check into it. So we send them the photos. We have all those and more. We've overgrown because we know this.
Yeah,
but
it's not our first rodeo, people.
Right, but we wanted to hear what they had to say. By all means, because I don't make radiators for a living. Sure enough, they look at the pictures and they're like, yeah, I tell you what, we still think it's the ground issue, but we'll send you another radiator, So, but that was one that, because we managed the part purchase and it was bought through our shop, we handled the replacement, got it in, not a dime charge to the customer, and he was going down the road and everything was happy. For about 2 weeks, then all of a sudden the fan quit. And luckily this customer is smart enough to know that if you turn the AC on, it would mandatorily kick on the electric fan and the engine would start cooling. But without the AC on, it kept rising and rising and rising. And we're all thinking, what happened here? Because it worked fine in our shop. And it turns out in this case that we bought a pre-assembled fan relay system that had a fuse and a relay for the regular fan. And it was commanded by the ECM of the engine to turn on at a certain temperature. And it was the only thing that was different was that a longer lead on the fan made the amperage required to start spinning it spike higher than the fuse was recommended for. So it had a 20 amp fuse in it, or it had a 30 amp fuse in it, and it was supposed to run at about 20. But when it first kicked on, it would spike to 45 amps or something, and it ended up popping the fuse. But that was all stuff that was supplied in a kit to us, So it came in, we're scratching our head on why the fan doesn't work, do a little diagnostic, find out that, I see, in this particular case, here you go. So we put upsize the fuse a bit, make sure the rest of the wire could handle it all. And he's going down the road again. And again, we didn't charge him for that either. It was something quick and easy and, not a big pain. But these are the little things
that
we try to warn these customers about and let them know, that this isn't a brand new car. And even if it was, brand new cars break too.
Brand new cars break. I mean, it's amazing that brand new cars don't break more often with all there's so many more parts in a car today than there was 20, 30 years ago with all the, safety additions and the engine management and all that good stuff and airbags and sensors. It blows my mind that they work at all, number one.
Yeah.
And the fact that they typically work very well, at least initially.
Yeah, well, for the most part, yeah.
It's astounding.
I remember talking to a girl a long time ago who had a new car in the 90s, and it had, I think it was a Chevy Beretta GT. Remember those Beretta GTs?
Yes, I do. With the 3.4 liter V6.
That's correct. Yes.
Uh-huh.
Not a bad.
That's a good trivia question.
Yeah. Sorry. It wasn't a bad little car, and it had some kind of electrical problem or something, and she was mad. Had to take it in, and I said, if you equate this to an appliance, because that's kind of how she used it. She got in and drove to work and back or whatever. I said, imagine if you treated your toaster oven the same way you treat this car. So you leave it outside. Mm-hmm. You don't clean it. You don't wash it. You don't maintain it. It goes from 2 feet of snow to 110-degree weather. All you do is plug it in and turn it on every day and run it all the time. The toaster oven would be smoked in a day and a half.
Yeah, that's a good point. A really good point. The toaster oven isn't vibrating going down the road.
Yeah, right. It's not being accelerated. You're not trying to make the toast in a half a second. You're
You're not going 0 to 60 in your toaster.
right. Exactly. So you're right. It is pretty amazing. The other thing that we're finding, to your point about the electronics, is even with the modified cars we build, we're doing a lot of fuel injection conversions, overdrive transmissions, AC systems, audio systems, electronic controllers, and the components. Okay, so I'll just throw Vintage Air out there for an example. Vintage Air sells their AC system, and they make the box and they assemble the controls and all the rest of it, but they don't make the relays. And they don't make the connectors and that stuff. They source them from somebody else. And those parts are made in some factory overseas for as cheap amount as possible. Mm-hmm. And so now when Vintage Air sells a system, they've got this relay that they bought from somebody else that was built as cheaply as possible. And now they sell it to us, and we put it in a customer's car. And if that relay goes, it's not even Vintage Air's fault. It's the whoever made the relay.
The source part, yeah.
And those pieces are becoming so cheap and crappy in many, many ways. I can't tell you how many relays we've gone through recently that just quit. Yeah. And when you look at them, it's like, a relay is basically an electromagnet that moves a switch. It pulls a little lever. And in the old days, they had a steel housing and a steel base plate, and they had a nice winding on the coil and everything. And they were substantial things. My 70 Buick sitting behind me has all of its original relays, the horn, and there's a fuel relay, all this stuff, and they're all still working. But if I go to the parts store today, probably I'm going to say 1 out of 50 is going to go bad in the first week.
That's crazy. You know what? It's funny you mentioned that. My neighbor Robert, he has his daily driver is a 05 Suburban, and he got into it one day, turned the key, and nothing. It wouldn't start. And he did a little digging around and realized that there's a little starter relay on the in the fuse block there under the hood, and he ended up replacing it, and he was going good. A few days later, same thing, got into it, didn't start. And he's like, what is going on here? Mm-hmm. And he has a mechanic that he really likes that he took it to, and he says, what's going on? I replaced this relay, and now this relay is bad again. Do I have something bigger going on? And the guy says, you know what? Sometimes a bad relay is just a bad relay, and you just got to go with it, replace it again, and you're probably going to be fine. Mm-hmm. And he was absolutely right. He's fine now. Right. He hasn't had an issue in about a year.
Right.
So, yeah, it's good to your point. Yeah, these relays are not as high quality as they once were. And
we're constantly trying to find the good relays, to see if there's a company out there that's making I hate to use the term industrial quality, but something that's heavier duty, if you will. And granted, it's going to be 3 times as expensive. A $6 relay is going to be a $21 relay, and I got to explain that to the customer. So again, that perception of just because something's new or it's been replaced doesn't necessarily mean that it's right.
Right.
So to kind of turn this whole conversation around, I think the important thing to do is, as a hot rodder, a custom car owner, a restored car owner, have an understanding that at any time there could be a problem with the car, and how do you minimize the high pressure, stressful situations that cause problems? Another classic one was my cousin Don. He's got that 65 Chevelle that we restored for him. It's a beautiful car. We went through absolutely every aspect of that thing. And he finally gets it home, and in his situation, his wife thinks it's cool, but she doesn't really, she's not really into these things, and she kind of saw it like a lot of people do. Here's a thing that my husband's spending a bunch of money on, and I don't really get the enjoyment that he gets out of it. So he takes his family out after he gets the car home for a little while, and they go to a famous, they go to Superdog, a famous hot dog drive-in joint in Chicago.
Right on, yeah.
And instead of going to the one that's close to their house in Chicago, they went to the new one, which is a half an hour up the road. And they go up there, and a caliper, or actually a spindle mount bolt, loosens up. Those cars have a backing plate bolt that is behind the spindle that mounts the brakes, and it loosened up and jammed, and it locked the wheel basically.
No.
And she's like, "Well, now what?" You know, and you can just see the stress meter goes to 1.5 million and beyond, because now it's he's been working on him a long time, trying to sell him on the fact that this car is nice and it's safe and reliable and everything else, and it's been, you know, kind of the other woman the whole time.
Right.
And it finally gets everybody to go along for the ride. It's summertime, so it's hot out, you know, and the tensions are running high already, and they go up there and they eat and they get in the car and they can't get home. And he called.
Well, at least they ate.
Yeah, right. Well, at least it happened at Superdog. I'd be happy. I'd just stay there. I mean,
Right.
that place is the
Sure.
greatest. So it was a situation where he called me and he's like, "Yeah, I got a problem." And luckily, he had the car towed back to his house, and him and his neighbor jacked it up and they saw the bolt. And he's understanding and has been playing around with cars long enough to know that sometimes things can loosen up. And it was Loctite and everything. I'm not sure exactly what the heck
Really?
happened. Yeah.
Holy cow.
Actually, I think what the story on that one is either the spindle hole or the bolt itself. It's a fine thread bolt, and I think it's almost an inch diameter. It's like a 7/8 bolt.
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
the threads were just gummed up with something when it got installed. And it felt, because it's a fine thread, it has that fine feel going in. Takes a lot of spins, which if it's stripped, it also takes a lot of spins. So I
Yeah.
think it was an honest mistake when it went together.
I see.
And you know, and we certainly cop to our mistakes when we make them, and I think that's kind of what happened there. But you know, it happened. So what I tell people is, expect the unexpected to a certain degree. But if you're gonna go take the family out on a Saturday night and you want a surefire, smooth trip, maybe take the car out on Thursday night and take it around the block. You know,
Yeah.
maybe buzz it around the block by yourself on Friday.
Yeah.
and let's stack the cards in your favor. You know, let's get a battery
Sure.
tender on it to make sure it's going to start and that it's charging.
Right.
Let's make sure the fluids and everything and that it's properly maintained. Don't expect the thing to sit for 6 months, to jump in it, throw everybody in it, and go to the amusement park and expect not to have any issues. It's an old car. It likes to sleep. You just woke it up. It's mad,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. It's happiest in the garage.
Yeah.
Sleeping.
Right. And stay on that stuff. And if you notice something, the brakes don't feel right or something's shaking or whatever, get it looked at as soon as you can. Because this past week we're finishing up a 69 Camaro, and it was basically ready to go home to its customer. And we try to simulate the usage that the car will see as much as possible. And I know that this guy's got a wife and kids, and they're all going to pile in this car and go cruising. So we made a point to put 4 people in the car and drive it around and see if the wheel tubs rub or the tires, anything like that, because you just don't know until you get into that.
That's a great idea.
Well, yeah, because otherwise, you know, we try to learn from the mistake of, the tires rub. Well, never rubbed with us. You know, what happened?
All
Well, I just
right.
put 28 people in it, they rub. It's like, oh, of course, you know. So now, you know, again, we try to account for that stuff. And on this little test drive, nothing really rubbed, but one of the things that we did not put new on this car, because this one came to us as a partial restoration, so part of the work was already done, including the rear brake lines. And when we did our last test drive with 4 people in it, it leaked a rear brake line. And we chalked it up to being a high payload in the car. Means the car is a lot heavier, means we stepped on the brakes harder and found a leaky line.
Oh.
Right, which we never would have found just kind of cruising around, or unless you're really beating the snot out of this car, which it's a brand new restoration and we didn't beat it up yet. So that happened on our time. We're replacing the line and then we'll send it home. But we were, 15 minutes from sending this car home with a ticking time bomb brake failure.
Oh man!
But we caught it because we're learning. We know a few things about this stuff, and we're trying to implement things like exit interviews for the car. We do an inspection when they come in. It's a 12-page thing that we check them top to bottom, and now we do that same inspection right before it leaves. And make sure all the bulbs work and all this stuff. Top to bottom. And
right on. That's good quality control.
Trying, and this stuff still happens.
Yeah. Well, imagine the stuff that would have happened if you didn't do all that. If you didn't take the time and really go through it before.
Well, yeah.
releasing it to the customer.
Yes, and to me it's irresponsible and it's dangerous, to just do that.
Exactly.
And one of our guys, a new team member, his name is Matt Ellebrock. He was saying that at one point he worked at a shop where they'd restore a car and then the owner would take it down to the gas station and back and say, okay, it's ready to go. And it's like, you need to do more than that. You're just inviting the comeback,
Yeah.
And
you're begging for it.
We like these cars a lot, but we want the owner to have them and not us,
What other cool stuff you got going on out there? What other cool cars are you restoring?
Well, we're I think this coming week we're about to tear into that 1967 GTO we just brought in. If that's where you were going with that.
That was my next question. Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Boy, you read me like a book.
Well, I see your GTO behind you, and it was like a giant gold cue card. It's an ugly car from the standpoint of its condition because it's got brown and red primer on it and things that look really rusty. But surprisingly, it doesn't seem to be that bad. So that one is finally gonna, by sending the 66 home and by sending this Camaro home this coming week, we'll have the front of the shop open up again, so we'll be able to bring this GTO in and a lot of little stuff. Another one of our fabricators, a guy named John Moss, who worked with us many years ago and left and came back, does some really, really cool work. We've got a 70 Chevelle in the shop that the customer wanted a gauge pod, but not on the A-pillar and not hanging under the dash. So he quickly whipped up this aluminum little thing that is really neat. It's just a 3-gauge deal, and it mounts on the side of the console, so it'll be down kind of below. Not like a rally gauge package on top of the console, because this car has an under dash air conditioner, so there's no space for it.
Oh, I gotcha. I see.
So just kind of making the best of a situation of what this guy has, but it's neat. Little folded up aluminum thing with some bead roller ribs in it and holes punched in it, and it's TIG welded and ground, and it's going to be a shame I think we're going to wrinkle coat it black to make it match the console texture, but it's going to be kind of a shame to cover it up because it's cool looking. We're very, very lucky in the fact that our crew, I just admire these people so much, and I respect what they do so much that when I walk through and I stop at the different stations, and it's like, oh, that's really cool, and I don't want to bother them because they're working, but I want to be the car guy and hang out and say like, hey, what are you doing there, and yeah, they're always doing something in the shop that I could stand there all day and bother them, but that's not my job. But at least it's good to know that I'm lucky enough to where we work in a place where people are doing cool stuff all the time.
Yeah, for sure. And they're doing what they're supposed to do when they're supposed to do it. And you don't have to be looking over their shoulders all the time. That's a really great thing.
Right. And that's not what I'm doing. It's not like I'm supervising. I'm just intrigued.
Absolutely.
I mean, we're either shooting video or pictures of it anyway, but it's like, wow, did you see what Brett's doing back there? Did you see what Jeff's painting? It's like, wow,
That
it's
is
cool. It's
stuff.
fun to be able to spectate.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. For sure.
So anyway, I think we've come pretty far on this show, and I'm curious to know if I got the trivia question right, and I think I didn't.
All right. Well, we're going to see here. My question to you was, when did the first mass-produced overhead valve V8 hit the streets in America for the American market by a U.S. automaker? And your answer was 1949. And the bonus question was, what manufacturer? And you said Cadillac. And you are right on both counts, my friend.
Oh,
I
right.
I would have accepted either Cadillac or Oldsmobile for the correct manufacturer.
Well, that was what I was going to say.
Both came out with the Rocket in 49 as well.
Yeah. How about that? Because that's when I was saying that, I was thinking, I know Oldsmobile was right around there at the same time, too, with the Rocket. And also, didn't Buick, I think Buick led the charge with the Dynaflow automatic first before
Probably.
Oldsmobile had the Hydromatic, or Cadillac had the Hydromatic the next year or something.
My research didn't take me there, Kevin, so I couldn't say for sure.
Yeah. Wow. Well, lucky me. Well played, by the way, because you had me guessing.
You know what? I'm not giving anything away to this guy again.
Well, you didn't. All right. So, for the past whole episode, I've been wondering about that. All right. Lucky me. So, in your case, the question was, in what year did the federally mandated 55 mile an hour speed limit take place? And the bonus, which is purely my opinion / understanding of why. And you said 1974.
That's correct.
You're right. That is correct.
Right on! Look at me! Winner, winner, chicken dinner!
That is right. Congratulations.
Folks, this is a historic moment here on V8 Radio. This is the first trivia question I've gotten correct in my entire V8 Radio career.
That's not true.
No, I've not gotten one right. No, sir, I have not.
Really? Wow.
I've come close.
Maybe. Well, you're just such a winner in my eyes. I didn't even notice.
Yeah.
Well, that's congrats to you. And then, as far as the motivation for that, you said you recall the 55 Saves Lives campaign, and perhaps it was because of safety. Was your final answer? And I think that's definitely true, and I think that's what they were kind of selling it to the public as. But I think the real reason was the fuel consumption, which you also mentioned.
I would.
I think in the oil embargo years, they really tried to kind of curtail that. But it's funny if you think about it. Since then, the speed limit just recently went to 80 in some places in Nevada. It's been 80 in some places in Utah for quite a while. It's been 70 and 75, and then of course, who was it? Was it Montana that had the reasonable and prudent?
Yes, it was Montana.
Yeah, no speed limit. And, above 55, it's not like people vaporize and just immediately die.
True. But so I guess I think a couple reasons for that, too, is I think the states really wanted to be in control of their own speed limits, too. I know from what I remember, if the states didn't adopt the 55, the federal government would have withheld subsidies for their highway improvements, for their road improvements, and I think they, kind of strong-armed them into going along with it. But I mean, nowadays cars are so much safer than they were in the 70s. You're going to survive a high-speed wreck a lot more often than you would back then. You would now.
Yeah.
So I think that's
without a doubt
as well.
I'm still kind of trying to get my mind around the government incentivizing less oil consumption. Because although that's what they're supposed to be doing, you would think that's a big nip in the tax income for them if they start selling less oil, gasoline and less. It'd be interesting to know what the taxes were on gasoline back then per gallon, and how much the state and federal governments got.
That would be interesting.
Because I'm pretty sure it's a lot more now.
I would agree with that. Absolutely.
Because I remember when I left California in 2003, gasoline was about $2.20 a gallon at my local Union 76 station, and I think a whole 40 cents of that was tax.
Huh.
Yeah. And each state sets it differently.
I remember. Do you remember? I think Obama was still president. I think he was in his first term, and gas was just outrageous. It was up here. It was
pushing
about $5 a gallon. I paid a couple times.
Yeah.
To fill up Jenny's Blazer, it was $75 one time, and I remember the state forfeited their share of the tax for a period of time to make it a little easier on the consumer.
Right.
And I thought that was fantastic. But after a while, they said, we're going to take that tax back.
Sure, right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that doesn't change. I do recall hearing an interview with Leno, and I think it might have been Adam Carolla and Jay Leno, and Jay was talking about where the magic number of 55 came from.
Is that right?
Yeah, and he seemed to suggest that there is no scientific formula, why 55? I mean, if you think about it, the cars are capable of driving faster. It's not like they're 2% safer at 53 miles an hour versus 58 miles an hour. And he recalled a study that I guess one of the states did, or maybe it was a federal thing. It was probably 10 years ago when I heard this, so I don't remember it in detail. But they polled a bunch of drivers in like the late 50s, and they said, "Okay, drive this car. What do you think the highway speed should be?" And they're like, "Oh, I don't know. And how about 55? That sounds great." And that was it.
Wow! Oh my gosh!
It was, yeah. It's 100% non-scientific of why that 55 number even happened.
Huh.
And so, certainly, if everybody was driving 60, 65, or 70, I mean, in the 60s, a lot of the states were 70 and 75 mile an hour limits.
Yeah.
And if you reduce that, you're going to save some fuel. So I don't know. It's just funny where the stuff even comes from.
It's funny. Huh, interesting.
Yeah. Well, congratulations. You got them all
Right
right.
on. I'm going to go buy steak dinner tonight now.
There you go. Yeah. Just make sure you follow the speed limit when you get there.
For sure.
All right, man. Well, another, what was it? It was
Moderately Neato episode.
It was it was moderately neato. I'll
For
give you
sure.
that. I appreciate the time. It was fun to do, and we are still available on iTunes and on the Google Play deal, where you can subscribe to the podcast, and on TuneIn Radio, and of course on the v8radio.com website and the Facebook page, which is still humming along. If you've got feedback or thoughts or comments, you can leave them there, and we check that all the time, because you can't really get away from Facebook.
No, sir.
So that's a good place to go. So we appreciate you hanging in and listening, and hearing Mike being victorious on the trivia question. And we will see you or hear you or talk to you next time on V8 Radio.
Winner, winner, chicken dinner!